Welcome to the Sports Betting Podcast from pregame.com for the week of November 5th, 2009. I'm your host, RJ Bell, and I'm joined by Marco D'Angelo with his new hat and 30 years in the business, Vegas Runner with his Rocky hat, and a genuine professional bettor here in Vegas.
Not new.
All right, not new. This is segment 1 of 6 this week, big game preview in college football, Alabama, LSU. Vegas Runner, what's the line on this game?
All right, this one opened up Alabama as a minus 9.5 point home favorite with a total of 38. As of this morning, Alabama's 7.5, and the total's still 38. So definite money coming in on LSU, the dog, in this one.
All right, so what's interesting here is we have a classic move that will actually, some people might say, and Marco, you actually think about teasers a good bit, so let's talk about this. Is typical teasers are two-team 6-point teasers laying minus 110. So at 9.5, you go down 6 points. If you're teasing down the fave, you're still laying 3.5. So you're not going through the most key number. If a game goes to 8.5, so 9.5 to 8.5 doesn't seem like much of a switch because, well, 8's not a particularly key number, or excuse me, 9's not a particularly key number. But now when you tease down from 8.5 to 2.5, you've gone through 7 and you've gone through 3. So even though these aren't key numbers in general, you always got to think of the teaser implications. So this is a significant move.
Absolutely. And looking at the game, the first thing that jumped out to me when I started to break this game down is really how good this Alabama defense is. Remember, they play in the SEC, and a lot of people regard the SEC as one of the best conferences in college football.
Last few years, the best.
And they've held 6 of their 7 opponents this year to 14 points or less. That's huge. That's where I start handicapping this one.
That's a great point. Now let me ask you a question. Is one thing I've always found interesting when it comes to discussions about defense is oftentimes people look at things like points per game, or they look at things like yards per game. And what I'm always a little more interested in, and either you guys can jump in, is how many yards per play. Because what happens is when you have a team like the old Houston teams way back in the 80s running and shooting and all these very aggressive teams, their Ds are always bad. And it's like, how could it be that there's never a great defense and with a great offense? And what you end up finding out is that some of those defenses weren't bad. In fact, they were good, but it was just the raw number of plays made there be more points scored. And to me, it's about yards per carry, or yards per play. So my question is, with this Alabama team, how much of this good defensive stats in your mind, Marco, are about the fact that on offense they're so conservative and they're running some variation of the Wildcat and there's so few possessions, or on the field, do you really think they're that good?
Well, you bring up a really good point, but I'm going to make an adjustment to looking at just yards per play. And what happens is you got to look at the style of the team and the games that they're involved in, because when you get games where teams have big leads, their defense is going to have bad yards per play because they're going to be having big leads where they go into prevent mode, and teams are throwing the ball because they're behind. So you got to look at each team. So the best
stat would be yards per play while the game is competitive.
While the game's competitive, and the best stat, I mean, I still look at points. That's the
yard per point is what is the big thing.
Right, so explain that.
How many yards does a team have to go for every point they score, or how many yards does a defense let up for every point scored?
All right, so do you want a higher number or a lower number?
Well, on the defense, you want a higher number. You want a team to have to go 20 yards for every 1 point. While on offense, you want to be able to score 1 point every 10 or 12 yards, let's say.
All right, and so that's more about red zone productivity, turnovers, and all that.
Being able to get the job done, actually.
So it's more of a holistic view of how well this team's doing on offense or defense.
Yeah, I put a lot of stock in yards per point.
The yardage on offense, what I look at, yards in offense, I mean, that's it. That's what you're earning. I like to look for teams, and once you get past the middle point of the year where the numbers are pure, I look for teams that I call 200 club members too, where they run for 200 yards and pass for 200 yards. When you get balanced offenses, especially in the college level, that poses so many problems for defenses, because which do you prepare more for? Do you shut down the run? Do you shut down the pass? And whatever you make the adjustment for, that's leaving that team with a good option.
That's a good point. I know a Big 12 coach, and he says that a good defense can stop a one-dimensional team. Now, a bad defense isn't stopping anyone.
Right.
But even a great defense has trouble against a two-dimensional team. I think that's a good handicapping takeaway. And one more takeaway, I guess, from the whole beginning conversation here is, yeah, yards per game and points matter, but consider the nature of the games, the speed of the games, and make a downward adjustment or upward based upon if the team plays a faster game or a slower game. Okay, great stuff. A little more theoretical, which is always good. Now, Vegas Runner, what's the one thing that jumped out at you about this game?
That Alabama has had that extra time to prepare for LSU.
So the bye is a key factor.
Huge for a team like that, especially when you play in the SEC. And I think this Alabama team was looking ahead to this game from when they played Tennessee in that tight game that they only won 14-12. So I think having that extra week is really a big edge for Alabama in this game. The other thing
let me counter that is, and I don't have the exact schedule in front of me, but I think the last few weeks for sure, LSU's had weak, non-competitive foes. So you can almost make the case that though they had to play, they potentially could get injured. Is they were somewhat preparing and somewhat saving their energy for this game. So it's not as good as the bye, but it would have been much better for Alabama if LSU had played Florida last week.
Yeah, and had to be tested. Absolutely. The other thing that really stuck out for this game was how the lines dropped from 9 down to 7.5. Because when you look at the ratings,
so it was 9.5 to 7.5.
Yeah, right? From 9.5 down. When you look at the ratings that the LVSC, the odds makers poll, puts out on a neutral field, this would be a touchdown game. So now that it's down to 7.5, they're giving absolutely no respect for Alabama playing at home. And I think that's a big mistake because this LSU team scores almost a touchdown less on the road and allows, a touchdown more defensively when they play on the road.
So slow down. So repeat the road stats for LSU so we're clear about it.
LSU allows a touchdown more defensively when they play on the road as opposed to overall for the season or even at home.
Understood.
So,
So the weakness for LSU statistically is defensively they give up about 7 more points a game.
A touchdown.
This is only their third road game.
Yeah.
Third road game. They went to Mississippi State and won 30-26, a game they could have lost. They definitely could have lost that game. And then they went to Georgia and they had to score late.
Which was that was a statement game though. Georgia, I remember that game because I was handicapping that one fairly closely. That game opened up about pick and was bet all the way up to 3.5. Georgia was, had a lot of backers in that game. And that's a nice win at Georgia.
It is. And getting back to the bye week, that close scare for Alabama.
With Tennessee.
Best thing that could have happened to this team. You look back over the years, every team, it seems like every year that when they run the table or they have their national championship season, they have that one game where they could have lost it. And that is such a motivator for the coach because now when you're undefeated, how do you drill and motivate these kids, because they're doing everything well. But now Coach Saban could drill them all week for 2 weeks. You guys almost lost. You're not taking this serious.
More importantly, LSU dominated them last year. They lost the game, but they dominated them. If it wasn't for 4 turnovers, they would have won that game. They had the ball for 7 minutes more. They had more yardage. They stopped Alabama like no one was able to. I think that was a game LSU had in the bag if it wasn't for 4 turnovers. So I think the close scare with Tennessee, this is huge.
Couple closing factors. This Alabama is a great example of the evolution with the public, where this team, a lot of people, even 3-4 weeks ago, were saying it was better than Florida. Now the bloom is off the rose with this Alabama team. Alabama is 10-22, so 10 winners, 22 losers as a home favorite. LSU is only 5-15 in conference, so neither of these teams are in a great spot. So I think the trends are about a wash.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so no official free pick on this. We each give one, and we went 3-0 last week. Everyone's hot with that. That will be in the future segments here. Okay, that was segment 1. Next up, segment 2, another big game preview: Penn State, Ohio State. And remember, you can watch all of our videos at pregame.tv, or you can download and listen. Just go to iTunes and search for pregame.com.